The words, slick and practiced, tumbled from Alara's lips, each one a tiny, poisoned dart. "We need to postpone the wedding. It's just Mark's important project launch is that week, and he needs my support. You understand, don't you, Alex?" I stood there, a ghost in my own life, the scent of her lavender perfume, the exact same fragrance she'd worn when she first shattered my world, coiling around me like a venomous snake. It was a cruel, olfactory echo of a past I was now impossibly reliving. The cheap floral notes seemed to mock the expensive setting of our soon-to-be former shared apartment. This time, however, the shock didn't paralyze me. It didn't send that familiar tremor of betrayal racing down my spine, leaving me breathless and broken. Instead, a cold, diamond-hard clarity settled into the marrow of my bones. I was back, and the universe, with its twisted sense of humor, was serving up the same betrayal, garnished with the same insincere apologies. It was happening again. The question that screamed in my mind wasn't why, but what now? I forced my features into a mask of mild surprise, a slight furrow of the brow, a gentle downturn of the lips. Inside, my heart was a stone, cold and heavy in my chest. "Postpone! Alara, everything's booked, paid for." My voice was carefully neutral, a feat of acting I hadn't known I possessed in my first disastrous run-through of this life. Flashes of the original timeline, vivid and agonizing, assaulted me. Alara's eventual inevitable affair with Mark, my supposed best friend. Their calculated, systematic theft of my business idea, the one that would have made me, the one they'd ridden to obscene success while I spiraled into debt and despair. My public humiliation, the whispers, the pitying looks, the acrid metallic tang of stale coffee from countless sleepless nights spent staring at a computer screen, trying to salvage the wreckage of my life, ghosted my tongue. I remembered their shared laughter, the conspiratorial glances I'd been too blinded by love, or perhaps sheer stupidity, to truly see. The air in our stylish, minimalist apartment, once a symbol of our shared future, suddenly felt thick, cloying, suffocating me with the weight of their treachery. How could I escape this meticulously crafted replay of my personal hell? Later, alone, the city lights of downtown sprawled below my window, painting streaks of indifferent neon across the polished floorboards. The old despair, a familiar phantom, tried to claw its way back, whispering insidious doubts. You failed once. You'll fail again. But beneath it, a different spark ignited, not the fragile flame of hope, but the cold, unyielding fire of steely resolve. They expected me to crumble, to accommodate their selfish desires, to be the same pliable fool I had been before. They didn't know this wasn't my first time at this miserable, soul-crushing rodeo. A humorless smile touched my lips, a grim curve in the dim light. The rules of the game hadn't just changed. I was the one holding the damn rulebook now because I remembered every card they were about to play. My first move wouldn't be one of desperation, but of quiet, calculated precision. The phone buzzed a day later, Khloe's name flashing on the screen. My sister. Her voice, when I answered, was a viscous ooze of feigned sympathy, a tone she'd perfected over years of subtle manipulations. "Alex? Oh, honey, Alara just told me about the wedding. Are you okay? Maybe it's for the best, you know? Gives you both more time to prepare." Prepare for what? More betrayal? I recalled, with a fresh surge of bitterness, how Khloe had accidentally leaked my original groundbreaking software architecture plans to a competitor, a company Mark had, with astonishing convenience, joined as a consultant mere weeks later. The memory was as sharp as a shard of glass. The cloying sweetness of her tone now was a discordant, sickly note against the cool, logical glow of my monitor, where I was meticulously reviewing the lines of my old, stolen code, searching for the vulnerabilities they'd exploited. "I'm managing, Khloe," I said, keeping my voice even. "Just a bit of a shock, that's all." Did she suspect? Did some flicker of my newfound awareness pierce her carefully constructed facade? Mark himself, the architect of my previous downfall, approached me a few days after that, all performative concern and counterfeit camaraderie. We were at our usual sports bar, the air thick with the smell of stale beer and fried food, a scent that now turned my stomach. He clapped a hand on my shoulder, his expression one of deep, earnest concern. "Mate, I feel absolutely terrible Ilara's putting you through this because of my work. Seriously, let me make it up to you, anything you need." The scent of his expensive, sharp cologne, a brand Ilara had started buying for him after they'd officially gotten together in the last timeline, pricked at my memory, a sensory trigger for the nausea coiling in my gut. He was already laying the groundwork, positioning himself as the supportive friend, the unwilling catalyst for Ilara's difficult decision. I saw the predator lurking just beneath the surface of his affable mask, his eyes gleaming with a hunger I now recognized all too well. "Thanks, Mark," I mumbled, feigning gratitude. "Means a lot." Would I confront him now, shatter his charade? No, not yet. The game required patience, a slow, deliberate unraveling of their plans. The first renewed wrongdoing, the opening salvo in their replayed campaign of deceit, came via a frantic call from Ilara. Her voice was tight with manufactured distress. "Alex, the venue. I just spoke to them about the new date. You know, the one that works for Mark. And they said there's a double booking. Can you believe it? For our new date." Her feigned outrage was almost comical. "Mark said he knows someone, a manager at a sister venue, who could probably pull some strings and get us a slot there, but, well, it's a bit more upscale. It'll cost extra. Quite a lot extra, actually." I listened, the receiver cool against my ear, a stark contrast to the simmering anger within me. I knew this play. It was a classic from their original repertoire. In the last life, this extra cost had conveniently and catastrophically come directly from my rapidly dwindling savings, the funds I'd earmarked for the initial phase of my startup. Mark had then heroically offered to cover a tiny, insignificant fraction of the inflated price, but only after I was financially crippled, his gesture a hollow performance of generosity. The knot in my stomach tightened, a cold dread mixed with a rising, righteous fury. The familiar scent of the cheap air freshener in our hallway, a cloying vanilla Ilara insisted on, suddenly felt oppressive. "How much extra, Ilara?" I asked, my voice deceptively calm. Would I fall into the same financial trap, allow them to bleed me dry before I'd even begun to fight back? To make matters worse, my own parents, usually bastions of unwavering support, seemed to have been subtly swayed by Ilara and Mark's carefully crafted narrative. During our weekly Sunday call, my mother's voice was laced with a hesitant concern that wasn't entirely for me. "Son, perhaps Ilara is right to be cautious about rushing things. And Mark, well, he seems like such a good, steadying influence on her, doesn't he? So ambitious." My father echoed her sentiments, his usual booming confidence replaced by a more measured tone. "Alex, sometimes these things happen for a reason. Don't be too hasty to judge." The familiar, comforting scent of my mother's apple pie, which I could almost smell through the phone line from their Sunday baking ritual, usually a source of warmth and nostalgia, now felt like a subtle, insidious part of the overarching deception. Their words, though gentle, were like tiny, unwitting stabs, each one aligning them, however unconsciously, with the architects of my previous ruin. The depth of Mark and Alara's manipulation, their ability to charm and deceive even those closest to me, was a chilling reminder of what I was up against. How deep did their influence run with my own family this time? And could I protect them, and myself, without revealing the impossible truth of my rebirth? The weight of that secret, and the burden of my foreknowledge pressed down on me, heavy and cold. Alara, naturally, pushed the venue issue relentlessly. "Alex, we need to decide now," she'd urged, her voice laced with that expertly feigned anxiety. "The manager Mark knows can only hold that alternative spot for a day or two, and if we lose it, we're back to square one, and we'll definitely lose our original deposit." She'd paced our living room, the late afternoon sun casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to writhe around her like grasping tendrils. Mark, ever the concerned friend, had chimed in during a carefully orchestrated three-way call. "Yeah, Alex, it's a tough break, but this new place is stunning. Honestly, it's an upgrade. I'd hate for you guys to miss out because of a few extra bucks." A few extra $1,000, he'd conveniently omitted. The sheer audacity of their coordinated attack was breathtaking. They were so confident in my pliability, so certain of their ability to manipulate me. The memory of my past self, so easily led, so desperate to please, filled me with a cold shame that quickly morphed into a harder resolve. They wouldn't find that Alex this time. That Alex was dead and buried, a casualty of their first betrayal. The pressure from Alara and Mark regarding the new, exorbitant venue costs became a daily siege. They emphasized the non-refundable deposit I'd already paid for our original, carefully chosen venue, a charming, historic building with a sun-drenched courtyard. That deposit, they lamented, would be lost forever if we didn't secure the new, pricier option immediately. Alara's eyes, those expressive pools of blue I once found so captivating, welled up on cue during a particularly intense discussion. "I just want our day to be perfect, Alex," she'd whispered, a tear tracing a glistening path down her cheek. It was a masterful performance, one I'd given a standing ovation to in my previous life. The scent of the expensive lilies Mark had thoughtfully sent Alara to cheer her up during this stressful time filled the apartment, their funereal fragrance a fitting accompaniment to their deceit. I let out a carefully calibrated sigh, a sound conveying weary resignation. I ran a hand through my hair, feigning distress. "Okay, Alara, okay. If it means that much to you, and if Mark really thinks this other place is the only option, I'll see what I can do about the money." The relief that washed over her face was almost comical in its transparency. "Let me handle the venue negotiations from here, though. I need to understand all the terms." We were seated in a dimly lit, overpriced cafe, the kind Alara favored for its ambience. The low lighting cast long, flickering shadows across the table, mirroring the duplicity that hung heavy in the air between us. She readily agreed, no doubt envisioning me meekly handing over my bank details. My first call, however, wasn't to the new, extortionate venue. It was to the manager of our original booking, a pleasant woman named Mrs. Gable. I didn't mention canceling. Instead, I expressed my confusion about a potential double booking issue that my fiancé had been informed of. "Double booking?" Mrs. Gable sounded genuinely perplexed. "Mr. Hero's last name, your date, the 15th of June, is perfectly secure. We have no other event scheduled. In fact, we were about to send out your final confirmation packet." I asked her to confirm this in writing, via email, which she happily agreed to do. Then I recorded our entire conversation, ensuring her statements were crystal clear. My next step was a bit more subtle. I casually asked Ilara via text to clarify the exact reasons for needing the date change again, mentioning I was trying to explain it to my parents. "Just so I get it right for them, babe," I'd typed. "It's all because of Mark's product launch, right? And that's why we have to move it from the 15th. She'd replied with an affirmative, adding a string of heart emojis, inadvertently creating a perfect digital paper trail. I made sure Mark was CC'd on a follow-up email where I summarized our understanding. The final piece was a discreet consultation with a notoriously sharp litigation lawyer, a contact I'd made in my previous life under far less favorable circumstances. The faint, dry scent of old legal texts and expensive coffee in his office was a strangely comforting aroma of impending justice. The stage for the public fallout was a family dinner, ostensibly to discuss the wedding changes. My parents, Khloe, Ilara, and Mark were all present. The air was thick with unspoken tensions and Ilara's cloying lavender perfume. After the main course, as coffee was being served, its rich, dark aroma a stark contrast to the bitter revelations to come, I calmly cleared my throat. "Before we discuss new venues," I began, my voice even, "I wanted to clear up a misunderstanding about the original one." I then presented the evidence, piece by piece. Mrs. Gable's email confirming our date was secure. A printout of Ilara's texts and the email explicitly stating the postponement was solely for Mark's convenience. Finally, I played a short, damning segment of the recorded call with Mrs. Gable. "It seems there was no double booking, Ilara," I said, my gaze steady on hers. "And since you and Mark are so keen on this alternative, expensive venue for the new date you require, perhaps you two can make use of it. I'll be keeping our original booking for June 15th. I paused, letting the silence stretch. "And I will, of course, be expecting my original deposit back from you, Ilara, or I will be pursuing legal action against both of you for the attempted fraud regarding this fabricated double booking and the associated financial pressure." The clatter of cutlery was deafening as Khloe dropped her fork, her carefully applied makeup unable to hide the sudden shock. Ilara's face drained of all color, leaving her looking pale and pinched. Mark, mid-sip of his wine, choked, a dark stain blossoming on the pristine white tablecloth. My parents stared, speechless, their eyes darting between me, Ilara, and the damning evidence on the table. The aroma of my mother's pot roast, usually a symbol of family unity, now seemed to hang in the air like a funeral shroud. How would they attempt to salvage this disaster? Their carefully constructed narrative had just been publicly and brutally dismantled. A week later, after a period of strained silence and furious, whispered phone calls I deliberately ignored, Mark approached me again. He suggested we meet for beers, to clear the air, no hard feelings. The chosen venue was a noisy, crowded pub, the kind where serious conversation was difficult and prying ears were plentiful, his preferred terrain for manipulation. The lingering scent of stale beer and cheap disinfectant assaulted my nostrils as I walked in. After some initial, awkward small talk, Mark leaned in, his voice conspiratorial. "Alex, I've been working on something big, and honestly, it's got your fingerprints all over it, in a good way. Remember that old social networking concept you were kicking around years ago?" He then proceeded to pitch my old business idea back to me, the one he and Ilara had stolen and profited from in the previous timeline. It was slightly tweaked, superficially repackaged, but the core intellectual property was undeniably mine. He even presented a basic, hastily assembled proposal, riddled with the same fundamental flaws that had contributed to my initial, and their subsequent secret, struggles before they'd pumped in stolen capital. "I was thinking," he continued, his eyes gleaming with false sincerity, "we could work on it together, for old time's sake. Combine your vision with my knack for getting things off the ground. I feigned a flicker of interest, then a growing enthusiasm. Wow, Mark, I said, allowing a note of admiration to creep into my voice. That's actually brilliant. Really ambitious. I let him bask in the imagined glow of my gullibility for a moment. I'd definitely need to think about it, though. My plate is pretty full with, wedding stuff and figuring things out with Alara. I watched him mentally categorize me as distracted, emotionally compromised, and, most importantly, easily led. The faint, almost imperceptible curl of his lip told me he thought he had me hooked. My thinking about it involved a series of carefully crafted countermoves. Over the next few weeks, during carefully orchestrated brainstorming sessions, always in public places, always with my phone discreetly recording audio, I subtly fed Mark a stream of misleading improvements for my business plan. These were strategically designed flaws, cloaked in plausible business jargon that I knew from my first painful experience would lead to significant financial drains and logistical dead ends. I painted them as cutting-edge enhancements, playing to his ego and his desire for quick, flashy results. Simultaneously, under the impenetrable anonymity of a shell company registered offshore, I began quietly developing my actual, significantly refined business idea, the true evolution of my original concept, incorporating all the lessons learned from my past failure and rebirth. I secured preliminary patents, registered domain names, and began assembling a small, trusted team of freelancers I'd vetted with extreme care. As a final touch, I accidentally left a vulnerable, early-stage document related to this new, but entirely decoy, advanced project on a shared cloud drive that Alara, I knew, still illicitly accessed, driven by her insatiable curiosity and greed. The file was encrypted, but with a password I knew she could guess or extract from my old notes. Her birthday. The digital breadcrumbs were laid. The public fallout was immensely satisfying. Mark, having enthusiastically incorporated all my brilliant improvements into his proposal, pitched the now fatally flawed business idea to a panel of potential investors. These were serious players, some of whom I'd subtly and anonymously warned through back channels about the disguised pitfalls and overinflated projections within Markwell Innovations, the arrogant name he'd chosen. The pitch, according to the gleeful post-mortem from one of my anonymous sources, was an unmitigated disaster. Projections crumbled under scrutiny, logistical plans unraveled, and Mark's confident bluster quickly deflated into flustered excuses. The investors, seasoned and ruthless, practically laughed him out of the room. The scent of expensive cigars and shattered dreams must have been thick in that boardroom. Simultaneously, the trap I'd set for Alara sprang shut. News, carefully leaked by my associate, began to circulate in niche tech blogs about a major data breach and attempted corporate espionage targeting my decoy, new advanced project. The story detailed how Alara Vance, fiancé of the project's alleged lead, had attempted to sell sensitive information to a rival company. The rival company representative she'd met with in a plush hotel suite I'd arranged was, of course, an associate of mine, a private investigator with a hidden camera. The entire transaction, her greedy haggling, her blatant betrayal, was captured in crystal clear HD. I chose to reveal Alara's treachery during what she'd tearfully requested as a reconciliation dinner at our apartment. She'd cooked, filling the air with the aroma of roasted chicken and herbs, a desperate attempt to rekindle something that was already ashes. After her latest round of apologies and pleas, I simply placed a tablet on the table and pressed play. The recording of her hotel meeting filled the tense silence. Mark, whom Ilara had inexplicably invited. For moral support, she'd claimed, a decision she now clearly regretted, watched with a face that shifted from disbelief to a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. Ilara herself trembled, her fork clattering against her plate, her eyes wide with dawning horror. The carefully constructed image of the wronged fiancé, the devoted partner, shattered into a million pieces. Would they finally confess their entire scheme? Or would their arrogance lead them to double down on their lies, even in the face of such irrefutable proof? The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, broken only by Ilara's ragged breathing. With the original wedding date rapidly approaching, the one I was still ostensibly planning, much to Ilara's bewildered confusion and Mark's simmering resentment, my dear sister, Khloe, reappeared, brimming with an unnerving eagerness to help. "Alex, you must be so stressed with all this uncertainty," she'd cooed, her voice dripping with false concern during a visit to my apartment. "Let me take some of the wedding load off your shoulders. Final vendor confirmations, decor, little things. What are sisters for?" The faint, almost cloying scent of her jasmine perfume, a fragrance I'd once associated with her breezy, carefree nature, now seemed to carry a whiff of deceit. Almost immediately after Khloe began her helpful campaign, critical items started to go mysteriously awry. Our custom-designed wedding invitations, which I'd already approved and paid for, were suddenly lost in the mail by the courier, according to the printer, a printer Khloe had helpfully recommended after my original choice had unexpectedly closed down. Specific decor elements we'd meticulously selected, like the antique silver candelabras for the tables, became suddenly unavailable due to unforeseen supplier issues. Khloe, with a sigh of theatrical frustration, would then present significantly more expensive, last-minute alternatives, invariably offered by companies that, with a little digging, I found had tenuous but traceable financial links to Mark or his known associates. She blamed incompetent vendors and bad luck, all while subtly steering me towards these pricier options, her brow furrowed with feigned concern for my rapidly escalating budget. The scent of lilies, Ilara's favorite flower and a prominent feature of our original decor plan, seemed to mock me from a wilting, overpriced bouquet Khloe had brought over as a sympathetic gesture. I played the part of the increasingly stressed and overwhelmed groom-to-be to perfection. I expressed mounting frustration, allowed her to witness my feigned near-panic attacks, and then, with a show of reluctant gratitude, allowed Khloe to take charge of fixing these escalating crises. "Thank you, Khloe," I'd say, my voice tight with manufactured anxiety. "I don't know what I'd do without you." I let her see me poring over spreadsheets, muttering about costs, reinforcing her belief that I was teetering on the brink of a financial and emotional collapse. She lapped it up, her eyes shining with a predatory light she probably thought was sisterly concern. My passivity, however, was a carefully constructed illusion. Weeks before Khloe had even begun her campaign of sabotage, I had already duplicated all essential wedding items and arrangements with a separate set of trusted, thoroughly vetted vendors, using a discrete budget drawn from funds they knew nothing about. These were stored off-site, ready to be deployed at a moment's notice. More crucially, I had installed a series of tiny, almost invisible security cameras throughout my apartment, particularly in the office area where Khloe often helped by accessing my laptop and files. The footage they captured was damning. Khloe, when she believed she was alone, meticulously sifting through my wedding-related emails, making furtive calls, and on one occasion physically removing a small, critical box of custom-made wedding favors I'd forgotten on my desk. Furthermore, my lawyer's forensic accountant had been hard at work, meticulously tracing the financial links between the new, expensive vendors Khloe was pushing and Mark's shell corporations, Khloe's digital footprints, emails, encrypted messages, small but significant bank transfers, were all over the connections, painting a clear picture of her willing collusion. The crisp, sterile scent of freshly printed bank statements and digital forensic reports in my lawyer's office was the aroma of her impending downfall. The confrontation took place just 3 days before the still-on wedding date. I convened a small family gathering at my parents' house, just them, Khloe, and myself. The atmosphere was already strained, my parents deeply worried by the escalating drama and my apparent inability to control the wedding chaos. After a tense, mostly silent meal, I calmly announced I had something important to share. "Khloe," I began, my voice low but firm. "You've been so incredibly helpful with the wedding, but I've been a little worried about some of the complications." I then connected my laptop to their large television screen. First, I played a curated reel of video evidence. Khloe surreptitiously pocketing the wedding favors, Khloe on the phone whispering about delaying tactics and inflated invoices, Khloe deleting specific vendor emails from my account. Next, I displayed the irrefutable financial trails clear, undeniable proof of her collaboration with Mark, showing her receiving kickbacks for steering me towards his overpriced, crony-run businesses. "I thought you were my sister, Khloe," I said, my voice devoid of its earlier feigned anxiety, now cold and resonant with a deep, settled anger. "I thought you cared about my happiness. Instead, it seems you were just another one of his accomplices, actively working to sabotage me to profit from my supposed distress." Her carefully constructed composure shattered like fragile glass. Her face, moments before arranged in an expression of concerned innocence, contorted with shock, then fear, then a dawning, horrified understanding. Our parents stared at the screen, then at Khloe, then back at the screen, their faces etched with disbelief and a profound, heartbreaking sorrow. The warm, comforting glow of the fireplace in their living room, a symbol of countless happy family memories, did absolutely nothing to dispel the sudden, glacial chill that had descended upon the room. Khloe opened her mouth, then closed it, no words forthcoming. The silence was her confession. Was the wedding still on? And if so, with whom was I actually planning to share that day? The unspoken question hung heavy in the air, a silent, ticking bomb. In the immediate, chaotic aftermath of Khloe's exposure, Ilara, now truly desperate, made her final, pitiable play. She came to my apartment alone, her usual confident swagger replaced by a hunched, defeated posture. The lavender perfume was gone, replaced by the faint, unsettling scent of fear. "Alex," she began, her voice cracking. I made a terrible mistake. A series of them. The postponement. It was always for Mark. He convinced me it was the only way for his project to succeed, and that his success would somehow benefit us all." Her confession, when it finally came, felt hollow, rehearsed, stripped of any genuine remorse. "But I see now. I see everything. I choose you, Alex. I always should have chosen you. Please, can the wedding still happen?" Her pleas, the tears that now flowed freely, evoked nothing in me but a profound weariness. The woman I thought I loved had been a phantom, a carefully constructed illusion. During these tumultuous weeks, while meticulously orchestrating the downfall of my betrayers, a different kind underscore of connection had unexpectedly blossomed. Sarah, an old friend from university, had reached out after hearing whispers of my troubled engagement through the alumni grapevine. We'd met for coffee, then another, then late-night talks that stretched into the early hours. She was a graphic designer, sharp, intuitive, with a calm, grounding presence that was the antithesis of Ilara's manufactured drama. She'd listened without judgment as I'd shared a heavily redacted version of my recent difficulties, offering not pity, but genuine support and insightful advice. The subtle, clean scent of her jasmine tea, which she always brewed during our conversations, had become an unconscious anchor in the storm of my life. She saw a quiet strength in me that Ilara had only ever sought to exploit. There was an unspoken understanding, a gentle chemistry that felt real, unforced. What would be my final answer to Ilara, now that a different, more hopeful path was beginning to emerge from the wreckage? The morning of June 15th dawned bright and clear, the sky an almost painfully brilliant blue, a perfect day for a wedding, or, in my case, a perfectly orchestrated demolition of one. Ilara, looking pale but surprisingly composed in a simple dress, arrived at my apartment at the prearranged time. Mark, his face a thunderous mask of resentment, trailed a few steps behind her, a reluctant, glowering shadow. Khloe, eyes red-rimmed and downcast, was with them, a picture of familial shame. They clearly assumed, despite everything, that I would cave at the last minute, that my love for Ilara, or perhaps my fear of public scandal, would compel me to go through with the charade. "Alex, please," Ilara began, her voice a low, desperate plea as I opened the door. "Let's just go. We can fix this. We can still make this work." The scent of her desperate perfume, a different, more subdued floral today, was laced with an undercurrent of sheer panic. It was the fragrance of a gambler about to lose everything. I stepped back, allowing them into the living room, its minimalist decor now feeling stark and accusatory. "The wedding," I announced, my voice calm and devoid of any discernible emotion, "is cancelled." Predictably, chaos erupted. Ilara's composure crumbled, her pleas escalating into near-hysterical sobs. Mark began to rage, his voice rising as he spewed accusations and threats. Khloe simply wept silently in a corner. As their desperate, ugly drama reached its crescendo, a sleek, obsidian-black sedan, silent as a panther, pulled up to the curb directly outside my building. The driver's door opened, and out stepped a woman who radiated an aura of quiet, unshakable power. She was tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, her silver hair swept back in an elegant chignon. This was Miss Eleanor Sterling, my silent business partner, my mentor from my original timeline, a formidable figure in the tech world, and someone my betrayers had never, ever known existed. In this new timeline, after I'd begun to lay the groundwork for my refined business concepts, filing initial patents under my shell company, Miss Sterling's formidable intellect had picked up on the digital breadcrumbs. Intrigued by the advanced nature of the concepts and the anonymity of their origin, her firm had discreetly investigated. When she'd uncovered my identity, the same Alex Riley she had mentored years ago, the one whose promising career had inexplicably imploded. She had reached out, her curiosity piqued, her belief in my potential rekindled. Our reunion had been a quiet affirmation, a second chance forged in the fires of my rebirth. She'd become the unseen architect of my resurgence, providing not just capital, but strategic guidance and an ironclad legal shield. "Mr. Riley," Miss Sterling said, her voice crisp and authoritative as she entered my apartment, her sharp gaze sweeping over the stunned, disbelieving faces of Ilara, Mark, and Khloe. Her presence instantly quelled their histrionics. "Your new corporate headquarters are ready for your occupancy. And," she added, with a slight, almost imperceptible smile, "I believe the restraining orders against these individuals have just been officially served by the marshals waiting downstairs." As if on cue, The faint but distinct whir of a professional-grade drone camera could be heard from outside the window, no doubt capturing every priceless expression of their utter shock for a private security reel. The air in the room crackled with a new, electrifying tension. Miss Sterling, with cool precision, then proceeded to lay out the full, staggering extent of my now secured company, Phoenix Innovations. She detailed its robust financial backing, its cutting-edge technology, built on the truly refined ideas they had so clumsily tried to steal and corrupt, and its market position, already light years ahead of Mark's spectacularly failed venture. She revealed, with a casual flick of her wrist towards a discreetly placed financial portfolio on my coffee table, the extent of my hidden wealth, substantial funds accumulated from a series of shrewd, almost prescient investments I had made early in this new timeline, guided by the bitter lessons of my past and expertly managed by her firm. The scent of expensive leather from her briefcase and the subtle, clean fragrance she wore filled the room, a stark contrast to the lingering miasma of deceit. "Alex didn't need your scraps of affection, Elara," Miss Sterling stated, her gaze unwavering. "Nor your amateurish attempts at sabotage, Mark, Khloe. He was always destined for far more than either of you could comprehend. You were merely temporary and rather predictable, obstacles he has now efficiently cleared." The glint of an understated but clearly very expensive watch on her wrist, the subtle hum of the high-tech security detail now flanking the doorway, all underscored the seismic shift in power. Elara, Mark, and Khloe stared, utterly broken, their faces masks of disbelief and dawning, horrified comprehension. Their pathetic schemes, their carefully constructed illusions of control, their perceived power over me, all of it had been stripped away in a matter underscore of minutes, revealed as the petty machinations of small, greedy minds. Mark began to splutter about his connections, his investments, his voice cracking with desperation. Elara could only whisper my name, her eyes wide and vacant. Khloe simply sagged against the wall, her earlier tears replaced by a dull, empty stare. Their words, their very presence, were now just empty noise, insignificant against the backdrop of my quiet, unassailable success. In the distance, the distinct sound of approaching sirens grew faintly, then unmistakably louder. Miss Sterling raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "Ah," she murmured. "That would likely be the authorities responding to the formal fraud complaint filed by the original wedding venue's legal team this morning. It seems they took rather poorly to the allegations of their supposed double booking. The game wasn't just over, it was a rout. How would they react to this complete and utter powerlessness, this public unmasking of their every sordid deed? The days that followed were a blur of legal proceedings, public retractions, and the quiet, efficient dismantling of my old life. Miss Sterling's PR team, with surgical precision, ensured that the true narrative, one of calculated betrayal and my subsequent, quiet triumph, subtly permeated the relevant social and business circles. The restraining orders were firmly in place. My old apartment was sold, its contents disposed of, erasing the last physical vestiges of Elara's presence in my life. The scent of industrial cleaning solution and fresh paint in my new, temporary corporate apartment was a surprisingly welcome change. Then, one by one they came, slithering out from the wreckage of their reputations, seeking not absolution perhaps, but some form of desperate, last-ditch salvage. Elara was the first. She found me in a quiet, sun-dappled park near my new office, a place I'd taken to visiting for moments of quiet reflection. The late afternoon sun cast long, mournful shadows across the manicured lawns. She looked smaller, diminished, the vibrant confidence that had once defined her extinguished. "Alex, she began, her voice a mere whisper, trembling like a leaf in an autumn wind. I was a fool, a greedy, short-sighted fool. She twisted her hands, her gaze fixed on the gravel path. I let Mark manipulate me. I let my own ambition blind me. But somewhere, deep down, Alex, somewhere in the beginning, I truly loved you, or I think I did. A tear escaped, tracing a path through the dust on her cheek. The earthy scent of rain on dry soil, a precursor to an evening shower, hung heavy in the air. Can you ever find it in your heart to forgive me? Mark, predictably, was less contrite, more brazen. He cornered me outside my new, gleaming office building a few days later, looking disheveled, his usually immaculate suit rumpled, his eyes bloodshot. The sharp, expensive cologne was gone, replaced by the faint, acrid reek of stale cigarettes and desperation. Alex, man, thank God I found you. He attempted a weak, ingratiating smile that didn't reach his eyes. Listen, I messed up. Big time, royally. That whole business idea, it was always yours, your genius. I was trying to keep up, you know? He ran a shaky hand through his already messy hair. But I can help you now. I know the market. I have connections. We can rebuild this, Alex, together. Partners, like we always should have been. His plea was a pathetic parody of his earlier arrogance. Khloe, my sister, tried the emotional blackmail route, ambushing me during a reluctant visit to my parents' home. They, at least, were beginning to understand the full scope of the betrayals, their initial shock, slowly giving way to a quiet, pained anger on my behalf. Khloe, however, was still clinging to the tattered threads of familial obligation. She caught me in the hallway, her eyes swollen from crying, her face pale and drawn. The familiar, comforting aroma of my mother's Sunday roast dinner, a scent that usually signified warmth and belonging, filled the air, now tainted by this final, agonizing confrontation. Alex, please, she sobbed, clutching at my arm. We're blood. We're family. You can't just cut me off like this. I made a mistake, a terrible one, but I'll do anything to make it right. Tell me what to do. Her tears felt like acid on my skin. To each of them, after listening with a patience I hadn't known I possessed, my response was the same. It was quiet, devoid of the raging anger I had once felt, stripped bare of any lingering sentiment. It was simply and irrevocably no. To Alara, I said, "Forgiveness, Alara, isn't really the issue here. The issue is trust. And you, and Mark, and even Khloe, you didn't just break my trust. You systematically incinerated it. There's nothing left to rebuild from. To Mark, my words were even more blunt. Partners? Mark, the only thing we'll be partners in is a courtroom if you ever breach that restraining order. You had your chance. You made your choices. And to Khloe, the hardest of all, I said family is supposed to protect each other, Khloe, not prey on each other. What you did, it wasn't just a mistake. It was a betrayal of a bond I thought was unbreakable. I need time, a lot of time. And honestly, I don't know if a making it right is even possible. I turned and walked away from each of them, leaving them standing in the ruins of their own making, their desperate pleas and hollow apologies echoing in the empty spaces where my love and trust for them had once resided. The sensation was one of profound, almost physical liberation, as if a heavy, suffocating cloak, woven from years of deceit and manipulation, had finally, blessedly, slid from my shoulders. The air felt cleaner, lighter. What did my new future truly hold, now that the ghosts of my past had been so decisively exorcised? 6 months later, the cacophony of betrayal had faded to a distant, almost imperceptible hum. I stood on the expansive balcony of my penthouse apartment, a space that was mine in a way no previous home had ever been. The The city of San Francisco sprawled beneath me, a breathtaking tapestry of twinkling lights and dark, slumbering hills, the iconic silhouette of the Golden Gate Bridge a distant sentinel against the inky sky. The cool, crisp night breeze, carrying the faint, salty tang of the Pacific, tugged at my shirt. Phoenix Innovations wasn't just thriving. It was soaring, disrupting industries, exceeding even Miss Sterling's most optimistic projections. The scars of the past, I realized, hadn't vanished, but they had transformed. No longer raw, open wounds, but faint, silvery lines, reminders of battles fought and won, of resilience forged in fire. A quiet, unshakable confidence had settled deep within me, a bedrock built on self-reliance and hard-won wisdom. Sarah, her presence a gentle, comforting warmth beside me, leaned against the railing, her hand finding mine, our fingers lacing together, naturally, effortlessly. We were on a brief work trip to a tech conference in Hawaii, but this evening felt less like business and more like a quiet, shared celebration of how far we'd both come. We watched the sunset bleed across the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange, crimson, and deepest purple over the tranquil glass-like surface of the ocean. Her calm, intelligent eyes, the color of warm honey, reflected the vibrant spectacle. There was no drama here, no hidden agendas, no cloying perfumes masking deceit, just a profound, shared peace. The subtle, clean scent of plumeria from the hotel gardens drifted up, mingling with the salty sea air, a fragrance of pure, uncomplicated beauty. "You seem genuinely happy, Alex," she murmured, her voice soft, her gaze shifting from the breathtaking vista to my face. Her smile was open, honest, a reflection of the serenity she herself exuded. I squeezed her hand. "I am," I said, the words simple, yet imbued with a depth of meaning that resonated through my entire being. "Happier than I thought possible." I thought, briefly, of Ilara, Mark, and Khloe. News of their various struggles occasionally, and unintentionally, still reached me through the digital ether or well-meaning but misinformed acquaintances. Mark was reportedly mired in a series of messy legal battles, his reputation in tatters, his Markwell innovations, a case study in failed ambition, and alleged investor fraud. Ilara, stripped of the financial cushion Mark had once provided, was apparently working a dead-end administrative job, her once bright sparkle dulled by bitterness and regret. Khloe remained estranged from our parents, who, while heartbroken by her actions, had drawn a firm line, their loyalty finally and rightly aligning with me. There was no triumph in their downfall, no vindictive pleasure, only a quiet, somber affirmation that I had made the right, albeit painful, choices. My journey, I understood now, hadn't just been about exacting revenge, however justified. It had been about reclaiming my agency, about meticulously rebuilding a life where I dictated the terms, where my worth wasn't contingent on someone else's approval or exploitation. It was about finding a partner who valued me for who I was, not for what they could gain. The delicate, almost imperceptible scent of Sarah's natural, jasmine-based perfume, a fragrance she wore not as a statement but as a personal comfort, was a quiet promise of authentic, shared tomorrows. Sarah tilted her head, her eyes searching mine. "You know," she said, a playful glint in her gaze, "when you first told me about your complicated breakup and the postponed wedding, I had a feeling there was a much bigger story there." I chuckled, a genuine, light-hearted sound. "You have no idea." I looked out at the vast expanse of the Pacific, the first stars beginning to prick the darkening velvet of the sky. "But that story's over." "This one," I said, turning back to her, my gaze holding hers, "is just beginning." Later, back in our suite, with the sound of the waves a gentle lullaby outside our window, Sarah raised a glass of champagne. The crystal flute caught the soft lamplight, scattering tiny rainbows. "To not waiting," she said, her smile genuine, luminous, and utterly captivating. "To seizing the moment, and to partners who can't wait to build a future, instead of endlessly postponing it for someone else's convenience." I clinked my glass against hers, the clear, bright sound a perfect punctuation mark. I looked at her, truly seeing not just a companion, but a partner, an equal, a woman whose strength mirrored my own, whose integrity was beyond question. The future wasn't just about professional success or financial security anymore. It was about shared joy, mutual respect, unwavering support, and the quiet, profound bliss of knowing I had finally found someone who didn't want to postpone happiness, but to embrace it, wholeheartedly, with me, right here, right now. The path ahead was open, vast, and beckoning, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, or perhaps two, I felt truly, exhilaratingly free.